Really excited to be chatting with Jackie today. She's in St. Louis, Missouri. How are you, Jackie?
I'm great, Clint. How are you?
Really, really good. And just the couple of minutes that we've gotten to know each other before we've started recording has made me very excited to have you explain the journey that you've been through, because you've got some things we'd like to talk about that some people come across in their own journeys, like traveling and how to eat out when you're traveling. Because you're going to tell us about how you're busy with your work and traveling around. We're going to touch upon in this episode methotrexate, prednisone, Enbrel, Orencia, Humira, Rituxan, and the good old US medical insurance, and how you've been through the washing machine with that. And Jackie's going to explain to us how she learnt so much through her experiences by researching and interviewing other people with this condition, which really gave her insights into, I guess, a lot of the deep struggles that people face, and how she went to the Mayo Clinic facilities in the US, a very, very famous establishment, as well as the Cleveland Clinic of Functional Medicine. So you've done a lot of your own research, and you've had tremendous results with the Paddison Program. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Me too. So I'm really excited to share. As far as the research is concerned, that's just how I'm built. When I was diagnosed with this, I didn't want to accept it. I think most people feel the same way. So I was looking for answers to find a way around it. Unfortunately, the disease is going to be with me the rest of my life, but I've found a way to live with it, and thanks to you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I've given a kind of an overview of where we're going to go with this. You've been able to share with me some of your results. Just hit the audience with just 15 seconds, like a TV commercial. This is where I was, and this is where I am now, before we get any further.
Okay. First diagnosed in March of 2016, and I woke up one morning, couldn't even open a tea bag. I couldn't tie my shoes. My hands were clenched. The pain, we first set up this interview to do, I look back at my journals and I can't even believe how bad I was when I read that, because I've come so far, and went through the process of going through a year of being on different medicines, switching around, feeling miserable, and then a year of changing diet after diet after diet, to now almost being 3 years since my diagnosis and feeling almost no symptoms of my rheumatoid arthritis.
It's fantastic. And you mentioned you're down to just 5 milligram of methotrexate, but you've been on all those drugs I mentioned before, except the prednisone, and you didn't quite get on Orencia and Humira. We'll talk about how you sidestepped those, but you've been on the biologics, you've been on Rituxan, and now you're just on 5 milligram methotrexate. So it's a fantastic result.
Correct. Thank you.
So tell us, you mentioned 3 years ago is when you got the condition. Let's just bullet point through your story. Not that I don't want it in a lot of detail, but you've got so much else to share that I want to touch upon in this episode. So let's work through your story in a sort of a bullet point fashion. Give us the highlights, and I'll jump in if I can relate to some of it and share some further insights.
Okay, great. So when I first came down with the symptom, I was misdiagnosed by my primary doctor after getting blood tests. I requested, after what I've read, I felt that I had rheumatoid arthritis, requested a blood test. She came back and said, oh, it looked negative. But when I printed out the results myself, it looked pretty positive. So the difficult part that I had was trying to get an appointment with a rheumatologist. I needed a referral, which I didn't trust my primary doctor at that point. And when this happened, this was probably in the first week of April, I couldn't get my first appointment until September. So we're talking 5-6 months.
Gosh.
So that was, and if you can imagine, feeling that much pain and being to where I couldn't hardly bear to do anything, I was really discouraged by that. So I kept trying. I ended up getting to a rheumatologist probably about a month later due to a friend who knew someone. And then I set up 3 more right after that. So I set up with 3 different rheumatologists because I thought I'm going to go to each one, see which one I like better, especially if it's going to take me 6 months to get into them. So I finally got the diagnosis probably 3 or 4 months after my symptoms. And that was probably the timeline that was the most difficult, because everybody wanted me to start with methotrexate, start with prednisone, and everything I read about it, I didn't want to start either of them. So eventually, after the third doctor had told me, yes, you have it, let's go ahead and start on it. I started with methotrexate, and about a month later, started with Enbrel, and did not feel well from either of them. So it was almost about 8 months when I was on both of these drugs, and nothing seemed to be working. But my doctor told me, we have to keep you on this for 4 to 6 months because that's what the insurance requires. So from that point,
sorry, I'm fascinated, and I haven't yet understood the worldwide country to country protocol for how the biologic drugs are qualified for. It does seem that in the US, it comes down to your insurance. It seems like if you've got insurance A, then you can go straight from methotrexate to a biologic drug, but insurance B, you may not be able to. Do you understand all this, or is it?
No. It's something that I've always kind of been aware of in the back of my mind until you experience it yourself. You're just like, this is crazy. And you're absolutely right, because, no offense against my doctors, but they were tripping over themselves to try to give you the next drug. Oh, and if that don't work, we'll give you this other one. Oh, you got this insurance, they'll approve that. We have to play this game with it. And it's ridiculous. And then when you actually get the cost of all this, I mean, I'm fortunate. I have a very good insurance plan through my work, but I know there's a lot of people who don't. And that they probably forego those drugs because they can't afford it. And it's just here in America, it's something we talk about. It's ridiculous. And I don't understand it,
Yeah. Okay. No, we're all still learning it. It seems very complicated. I know that in Australia, you've got to be failing certain number of the conventional disease-modifying drugs. So you might go methotrexate, then you might add a sulfasalazine or a plaquenil, and then if these things all together fail, then the government will subsidize and you can go on a biologic drug. So that's the system here. You've got to fail, and so therefore you're eligible because your symptoms are so bad. In the States, I witnessed this, like your story, with other people. They just go straight onto a biologic drug, and I'm like, whoa, okay, it must come down to the insurance level. So, but thank you for that. Now, okay, so you've gone on these 2 significant drugs, and 8 months in, you're feeling rotten. What next?
So again, back to the insurance, my doctor seemed to think that Rituxan would be the drug for me, but she said I needed to go on another biologic for the insurance, satisfying the insurance company, because you need to fail 2 of those before you can go to the Rituxan. So she was going to try to she tried to get the Rituxan and was going to try to go to Humira or Orencia. And somehow, lo and behold, I got a call from the hospital that said, hey, we're going to set up your appointment for the infusion for Rituxan. It's done by an infusion. You get it, and then you 2 weeks later get another infusion, and then you're good for 6 months.
Yep.
Supposedly. So that was the next step. And I jumped right from the Enbrel to the Rituxan.
And you stopped the Enbrels completely, but you kept the methotrexate weekly tablets while you were going through this 6-month period. You were just basically on both.
Yeah, the methotrexate, so they started me with 4 to see if my body could handle it. Then I went to 6 tablets, 20 milligrams, and then to 25 they wanted me to be on. And the first week I took that dosage, I knew I was a little foggy with even starting the methotrexate, but this one really put me over. I was in the middle of a conference call and couldn't even finish the conference call. And I was just really confused. And after a week of it, I said, no, I can't do this. And my doctor continued to try to push me because she really wanted me to be on 10 tablets. And I just, said, no, I can't function under that. So we kept it at 6 tablets a week.
At 2.5 milligram each.
Yes.
Okay. So fast forward through the Rituxan 6 months. Did you ever get to the second round of injections? Of infusions. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hard to decide to actually explain if it's the first or second, because one round is a dose. You get an infusion, and you go 2 weeks later. So I did that in the January of 2017, and I was due to have the next infusion in June of 2017. So at this time, I'm feeling pretty good. I went to the Mayo Clinic in between that, just want to see what they know. And after, spending time with them, they said I'm on the right path. I figured they wouldn't probably disrupt what my doctor's doing. They said she's doing a great job. So continued on it. And this was in March of 2017. The Rituxan, my understanding is it takes 6 to 8 weeks to start to feel, to make any difference in your body to reduce the inflammation. So I started to feel relatively good at this point. And right about that time, in the first week of March of 17 is when I found your program. So I also started with the diet right then. So needless to say, I was feeling really good March, April, May, June. And I went 4 months with the Paddison program, just cold turkey. When I found you and I was at my cottage in Michigan, I just watched every podcast I could. I was reading everything I could. I signed up for the program and I went all in, cold turkey, boom, almost to our, fasted for 4 days and did everything. Yeah. So July comes around. I'm supposed to be getting my infusion, the next round of Rituxan in June, July. And I asked my doctor if I could put it off because I'm feeling great for at least a month. I had a couple of big trips planned. I was going to the Virgin Islands. I was going to Napa Valley. So I'm feeling good. So in feeling good, you think you can start introducing some more foods, have a little bit of wine, have a little bit of this and that, and come back from my vacation. And I start to feel a little, not so well. Inflammation's feeling a little bit more. So I called, my doctor called and she said, "Oh, you've gotten refused by your insurance company for the next round. They denied you. They said you don't have cancer and it's a leukemia drug." They said, so therefore they're denying you. So she said, "We'll appeal it." So I'm a little angry at this time because I'm not feeling so good. And I'm thinking this is a drug that's working. But I also didn't know, well, maybe it's also the Paddison program, the diet, So after I vented through my frustration for about a month, I finally realized this is a blessing in disguise. Because now what I can do is the Rituxan's out of my systems. My understanding is it lasts about 6 months. And so therefore now I can go all in with the diet. And so I was a little excited to do that. So right around August, September, I went back to being really strict with the Paddison program, sticking with it, exercising, doing everything I need to do. So again, 2 more denials from an insurance company on the Rituxan. Went back and saw my doctor in September, October. And she said, "You're looking really great, considering that we're not getting this, we'll try to get the medication approved again." Late October, maybe November, I got a notice from my insurance company that they approved me, but I didn't say anything because I'm looking at my blood work, which I'm getting every two weeks at this time. The SCD rates looks great. The CRP looks great. So I'm thinking, I don't feel any inflammation. So why change anything? I thought the doctor would call me. Well, she never called. So January of 2018 was my next visit with her. And she said, "Oh, I see you got approved for the Rituxan. Let's set up another infusion." And I said, No. Let's take a look at it. Look at me. And she goes, "Yeah, you do look pretty good." And at this time, I'd also since September, I started to lower my methotrexate. I had talked to her about it before. She didn't recommend it. But when I went in for this visit, I said, "Oh, by the way, I lowered my dose to 5 pills." And she's like, "Oh, okay," and I was feeling good. And I did it slowly, because I don't like to jump at it. So then she said she agreed with me. "Let's check back with you in April 2018 now." And she said, "We'll see how you're doing." Went back in April. Everything again looked really good. Oh, by the way, I lowered myself to 4 pills of methotrexate. So we were doing pretty good. I had a little bit of a bout there. We had a little bit of stress going on in my life. I took on a new puppy, which wasn't the best idea, but my head and my heart don't always balance. So then on top of that, we were doing a reduction in workforce. So a little stress with the job. We had to eliminate some jobs. So I started to feel a little inflammation. And, with the puppy, I wasn't taking care of myself. So she was a little concerned about that. And even though my blood work came back, she started to introduce, possibly put me on Plaquenil, which is a malaria drug, my understanding. So I said, well, wait a minute. She said, well, it just will help you, blah, blah, blah. So she wanted to do some tests on that. At that time, now I'm at my 2-year mark, and I was getting ready to go back and get my x-rays on my hands and my feet and my MRI to check it against the baseline. So, I'm very inquisitive of my doctors. I asked them a gazillion questions. I'm probably one of their toughest patients, but I said to her, so if my MRI comes back, my x-rays come back, and my blood work looks fine, is there any reason to go ahead and start with a Plaquenil? And she said, no, I don't see a reason for it. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, sure enough, came back, everything. I got back on a diet. I ended up giving the dog away. I realized it was
Oh.
the best for me,
Mm-hmm.
and went forward with getting back to business and staying on diet. And when I went back and saw her again in July, everything looked great again. And by the way, I told her I'm lowering my methotrexate to 3 pills. So, I pretty much carried that all the way through. Been feeling great. In November, I went down to 2 pills. But I also realized what the one part I was missing was the exercise. So the
Yes.
3 components that have been really life changing for me is the diet, reducing stress, taking care of what only I can take care of, and making sure I do a lot of mindfulness meditation, and the exercise. The exercise, when I came into this diagnosis, I was as fit as I think, anybody could be at my age. And I think that was the most difficult part, was then all of a sudden I couldn't do anything. So it took a year of really struggling with different medications and not feeling, like doing the fatigue. And then when I started feeling better, it was the one part I didn't put right back into it because it was kind of hard to get back into it. So I kind of made a pact with myself in November that I'm not going to allow myself to reduce my methotrexate anymore until I start doing the yoga, Bikram yoga, 5 days a week, get back on it. So that's the journey I'm on right now. And
Wow.
until I finish that 100-day plan, actually, I won't allow myself to reduce the methotrexate anymore. So.
Wow. Fantastic. Wow. Really enjoyed hearing that. The Bikram yoga that you introduced, did you notice a stepwise reduction again in inflammation, or any other improvements, physical improvements after getting into that?
Yeah, so I would like to say that I'm a little bit more consistent than what I really am, but I'm not. I think the most difficult part for me is finding consistency in this program, is because of my travel schedule.
Mm.
So I felt like I was doing it just here and there. In order to kind of make up for that, like when I'm on the road, I try to find a gym or a location where I can go to a steam room or sauna, because I feel like I still get the same effect of getting the sweat and the toxins out, and helping my joints. But I haven't been consistent with the Bikram yoga, so I'm really looking forward to get to that point. I'm kind of researching areas that I go to on a regular basis. Chicago, I'm always there, looking at studios that I can actually become a member, so I can drop in and do classes on a regular basis. So that's the only thing. I do know that it has helped me when I'm actually doing it, but I really need to find consistency. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Is there anything else you do besides yoga that's helpful for your joints physically?
Yeah. I do all kinds of workout program. I think that, I know some people have difficulty with doing weights and things, but that has helped me tremendously. Just build that muscle mass. So I fluctuate between a weight program where it can building muscle, and cardio every other day, and just keep moving. The big difference here is that I find if I sit, that I don't feel like doing anything. So it's always in my mind. If you check around my house, I have post-it notes all over. Give yourself 45 minutes a day. Keep moving, keep moving. And that's just a motivator for me. So just to do any kind of activity, there's a lot of pride you have to swallow, because I'm a very competitive athlete for many years, that you have to realize you can't do certain things you used to be able to do.
Mm.
So that's a difficult thing. I used to run, can't really do that too much anymore. The knee kind of flames. So I have to kind of lower that a little bit, but I learned that that's okay. It kind of goes along with my age. So
I can totally relate to that. I used to be a long distance runner, cross country runner, and really enjoyed it. Just absolutely love the feeling of the breeze in my face, and the just the exhilaration, even not at a fast pace, but just at a long distance run that you get when you're running. And my knees just too damaged to allow me to do that. on the left side, and I re-damaged it this year. Only about 6-7 months ago, I was getting up off the floor in my daughter's room, and I re-injured the knee. And so I've been working at the gym very, very regularly, and Bikram yoga, back into it like the old days, just to get the strength back around the glute muscles and the lower part of my quadricep, because I lost a little weight with the newborn baby, just not able to, and I've always been slim. And so for me, I've always had to be active at keeping my muscle mass.
Sure.
And so anyway, losing a little weight around, particularly the hips and the thighs, and then the knee becomes susceptible to injury because it has to bear more weight because the muscle mass isn't there to protect it.
Yes.
And I re-tweaked it, and actually this afternoon I'm going to have my MRI, which I had done recently, evaluated, and just see what the knee is like, because it's been about 8 years since my last MRI on that knee. So I can totally relate to it, and I watch people running from our balcony, because there's a bike path outside our balcony here at the house. And I say to Melissa, I just want to be able to run like that guy. Look, he runs really, So look, we all have those sort of feelings of disappointment, but there are other things that we can do to substitute those. And I'm so glad you talked about creating muscle mass, and I just think it's so important to build muscle. When we feel strong, it's an antidote for the emotions that come with the joints, pain and so forth.
It's an important thing with that too, Clint, is I didn't realize how much I'd lost too. I kind of, when you lose the weight, you don't feel like eating anything because you feel terrible, so you start to lose weight, and you look thin and frail. But then even when I started to gain the weight back, I realized the muscle I lost. And now that I'm back on this workout program and started, you can see a difference just in staying with something for 2 or 3 weeks. I can't believe how much, you forget when you're in shape, you forget how much, shape you're in, so you're out of shape, but you feel so much better. So if you can just do a little bit, I always have, 10-pound weights, 5-pound weights sitting right there. If I'm going to watch something on Netflix, I'm going to be doing this while I'm watching TV or a sporting event, watch a games on TV. I got them right there and just knock out the reps. So I always try to keep it front and center,
Completely agree. Last night we're watching the end of a Netflix documentary, and I'm doing the pranayama breathing exercise right in front of the TV, the very first thing in Bikram.
Right.
So or if I'm not doing that, I'm on the floor and I'm stretching, I'm doing some hip opening exercises, or some silly wide stretch for my inner thighs. I'm the same. So I think
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
If I can give a tip, I do this. My sisters are probably going to laugh at this, but if I can give a tip to viewers, we all brush our teeth every morning and every night, and I have a electric toothbrush, and it's set for 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, I can knock out 120 squats. You can do so many things if you just think about it. And if you're doing this for 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes in the evening, think of a difference you can make just in 2 weeks. So
120 squats is incredible.
You can do it. It's every, for 2 minutes, you're just sitting there and you're just doing different things. So I always try to mix it up. So,
do you go down to chair level, or is it sort of a semi squat? I find this really interesting.
I do chair level, and I do it shoulder length and a little bit wider and a little bit wider. So you're working different.
So that your knees and feet get further apart each time. Yeah. Hey, have you ever found with your knee any kind of position with the squat that irritates the knee? Like, how do you squat to ensure your knee feels good?
Yeah, sometimes it's, gets tweaked a little bit. And I'm an old soccer player, so I tore the ACL, MCL.
Me too. Torn my ACL, yep.
Seems like that's the first area that gets attacked when you have a flare-up.
100%. That's what happened to me too. Yep.
So I find that in the twisting, I just have to be very careful in the twisting motion. And especially if I do those squats that are where your knees kind of at an angle, it's a little more difficult. Lunges too are something that I used to be able to do fairly easily, but as you start to lose the muscle around that knee, you start to have a little, you don't want to put too much strain on it. So sometimes when you do lunges, that's a little hard. And And what I do sometimes is just, use your hands on your thigh or something, just so there's not so much pressure on that knee to
Yeah.
bring you back up.
Yeah.
But yeah, building it around it, and it's even just building the hamstrings and the quads. You can sit on the floor and you can, from old knee injuries, you can do quad sets. And again, 2 to 3 weeks of doing those, holding those for 5 or 10 seconds. It's amazing the muscle you can build up in your quad just by sitting down. I do it in a car. I drive a lot. Sometimes I drive, 4 or 5 hours in a car. And if I'm sitting at a stoplight or something, I'll flex my muscles and my quad and stuff and try to strengthen that.
I see. So you're not actually, you might only raise off the seat maybe only 1/4 of an inch, but it's just the engagement and pushing down through the heels that gives it the squeeze.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Yeah, fun. I'm going to knock out 100 while we chat here.
Yeah, right. On my bouncy ball right now, it's good for your core. So
Fantastic.
Yeah.
These are really good tips. Tell us if you are now speaking to someone who knows nothing about the Paddison program, but they have the materials and they've read it, what would be the things you would say make sure you emphasize or look out for?
Well, I found it pretty easy for me to go into the fasting, and that's kind of maybe a little unusual, but a lot of people are so afraid of that. And I would say then go into it with doing some broth or do a liquid, where you get a little bit of something if you're concerned about that, or just do it for the amount of time you can do it. You don't have to do it for 2 or 3 days. I feel the best way to do it is to jump right into it. But that's just me.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we think too much about things, and I'm going to start my diet on Monday. I always say my comeback is, why not start today? Why not today? So if you can just jump right into it, that's the only way you're really going to know. I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. Everyone's different. So what I experienced with it, and I followed your program, I found success with it. But then after I went back a little bit, I found that maybe the quinoa wasn't so great for me. I was just so excited to have some food after doing the juicing and the fasting that I was like, oh, this is great. But you have to really tweak it, and it takes a lot of coming back to it. So the only way you can really find success in it is by starting it and starting to get underway and let it get going. And the elimination diet is difficult, but I find that I do resets every so often, because once you start feeling good, it's easy to say, oh, I can have that, or I can do this. And we all, we don't want to give up the things we love. So we do, I love wine and I like to go back to it, but I also know the consequence of what's that going to be. I find that I can tolerate those things now because I don't do too much of it and I don't string it together. And so it's really rewarding once you find that you can control your symptoms with your food. And finding your program gave me hope when I was at a point where I thought, wow, this is the way it's going to be. I really went to a dark place. One of the first things I did, and sorry to kind of get sidetracked here, but when I first got diagnosed, I'm always the one that's always trying to figure out the answer that, I'm gonna find a solution for this. So I started to contact people that had it. The first person that came to my mind was a college friend who we had just reconnected. And, now you look back, there's a reason why we reconnected, but I had just moved back to St. Louis from Chicago. And I remember in the back of my mind her saying that one time we were at breakfast, but I never really, shame on me, didn't pay attention to really what it was. So I called her first, and she said to me, I'll never forget this. She said, I pray, my friend, that you do not have this, because it's a devastating disease. I've struggled with it for over 15 years, and I hope you don't have it. So from that moment on, I started contacting other people who had it. My questions were, how long did you have it? What were your symptoms? What are the medications you're on? Who's your doctor? What's the side effects? And the damages, if you had any. And I think the most discouraging thing for me, which I'm sure a lot of your viewers are finding, is that no one seemed to get better. And that was so discouraging, because everybody was changing medications. Sure, the drug made them feel good for a while. They were calling it miracle drugs in some circumstances. People would say, oh, this one was great. And then after 4 or 5 years, I couldn't handle it. And that wasn't good enough for me, And I went to a dark place where I was so depressed, because I thought, wow, everybody's on these medications to keep changing, and this is the way it's going to have to be. Until I found your program and started reading more about diet. And when I looked at stories on your podcast and saw that, wow, it's not the methotrexate side effects aren't in my head. Somebody's really experiencing this. I knew that I wanted to try to get off that. And then I saw hope that people were really getting off their medication. There was something to shoot for. And it was a changing point for me. It turned everything around. So to the viewers out there that are struggling, I think you can find really some relief through changing your foods, finding out what's triggering the inflammation in your body. There's hope, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Wow, that's really cool. You talk about the example of finding the sort of inspiration by watching other people come off their medications and thinking to yourself, I can do that. When I was on methotrexate, I had only been successful in getting it from 25 milligram down to 15 milligram, and finding it still difficult to try and get consistent month to month, very low C-reactive protein levels so that I could lower it further. And I had no role model at the time. There was no someone that I could watch to see that they had been able to achieve this and that therefore it was possible. But I just had belief that it had to be possible because when I stopped eating, I felt great. And so I thought it's a digestive issue and it absolutely has to be able to be fixed. And that's all I had in my mind. But for me, just to recall, what happened, I was in the United States and I had my methotrexate with me, and then completely innocently, without any kind of intention, we left my methotrexate by accident at my mother-in-law's house when we returned to Australia. And it took a week when I got back to Australia to realize that I didn't have it. Then we contacted her, and it took over 2.5 weeks for it to get sent from the United States to Australia. And then I hadn't taken it for 3 weeks or even a little more. And I looked at it and I thought, it's been 3 weeks since I've taken it and nothing feels different. And I thought, if I can get through another 3 weeks, I might be off this thing. And obviously this is not what I recommend anyone does. But I'm telling you, at the end of like 2-3 months passed after that, I didn't notice a single difference, not one single difference in my body, as though the drug had stopped working a long time ago. And I was taking this medication at 15 milligram a week, which is, mid-range. And I don't know how long I would have been on that drug if I had not have accidentally left it in the States and then kind of became a little rebellious on top of that. I don't know. But anyway, look, now we have other conventional people who've done conventional methods of coming down off these medications, and that is inspiring, and that it definitely creates that hope that you talk about. Let's move on to your experiences with Mayo Cleveland Clinic. What's happening at these world-class facilities with their belief on how to treat these conditions?
Well, I put in about 3 or 4 months after my diagnosis and, the frustration of getting into a rheumatologist here in the States. I started to do research. I looked in Chicago, trying to look for the best rheumatologist I could. And when I looked at these hospitals, traditionally, John Hopkins comes up, and the Mayo Clinic is some of the best rheumatologists hospitals in the country. So I put in for an appointment. It took about 6-7 months for me to get in. And I was excited about it. I don't know what I expected out of it, a breakthrough, miraculous thing, or them to say, oh, you don't really have it, but I really also wanted to know, I wanted to get as many bright minds in this field to tell me what they know about it so I can kind of make my own decisions on how to move forward. Well, the one thing that was kind of surprising, I spent a great amount of time at the Rochester Mayo Clinic. They're really thorough with you. 3 hours, went over all my records, checked everything.
Yeah,
it's really good. They real comfortable setting. They answer every questions and don't feel rushed. And the one thing I really want to ask more about was nutrition, because I'm kind of on this path now and starting to learn about. I have a niece who has celiac disease, and she was really helpful in helping me to, hey, I started gluten-free, then I did paleo, I did all this stuff to try to find the right thing that worked for me. So I was asking about nutrition, and I think what surprised me is that, I expected it from my answers from the doctors that I have here, but I didn't expect it from Mayo Clinic for them to say, well, we really don't have anything on it. We just can't encourage you there because there's not enough evidence, and we can't send you down that path. So basically they handed me a brochure on meeting with a dietitian.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yes, I was kind of
Mm,
surprised about that.
mm,
But I can understand it. As I started to realize, these doctors, they get maybe 4 hours of nutritional
yeah.
study during their thing, and they're really there for medicine.
Yeah.
And so I get it,
Mm,
but it's interesting how now I can kind of almost see just in the 3 years since I've had the diagnosis, even my doctor has started to really change her thinking in that. Before she was like, no, I can't, and I get it because a lot of people, when you start them on a nutritious path to try to get themselves better, most people can't stick to it, And I found it's difficult even for me. I'm single with no kids, no family, so it seems to be easy for me to be able to make those decisions when it comes to dinner time, what I'm going to eat. I know a lot of people struggle with that. So I understand that most people don't stay with it, so therefore it's very hard for them to get, true, um, information and something that really works.
yeah.
So with the Cleveland Clinic, I went to Cleveland Clinic of Functional Medicine, and that's completely different. They're really all about looking at the foods, doing an elimination diet,
Right.
and yeah, that was also, thanks to you again and the information that I found on healing the gut. By the time I got to the Cleveland Clinic, which was October this past year, even the nutritionist and the dietitian were saying, "This is the stuff you have. You're doing really great." And I actually spoke to some of the people in the room that just said, "Hey, this is the path I'm on, and this is where I've been, and you're doing the right thing. You're trying to figure it out." So I think I was inspirational to some of the people that were there that had just started to have problems with their gut and not knowing what's going on with their body.
Mm,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, but I really, the Cleveland Clinic was really great. And again, spending 2 to 3 hours with the doctor, meeting with a health coach, meeting with a nutritionist, and really going through the whole process of elimination diet so you can figure out what the triggers are.
So,
And
so you pretty much just booked an appointment as you would to your local doctor, and you said, "Hey, I'm from out of town. I'm just coming in. I'd like to have an appointment," and you kind of select the specialist that you'd like to talk to. Is that kind of what you did?
absolutely.
Right.
And what they do with this initial meeting is you meet with the doctor one on one for a couple of hours, and they go from. I mean, it took me about 6 hours to fill out the paperwork because they go from everything from when you were born, how you
Mm,
were born, what kind of formula,
yeah.
and my mom passed away when I was 12, so I had to
Right.
rely. Fortunately, I had sisters to rely on, saying, "Do you remember what kind of formula it was I
Mm,
breastfed? Was it a formula?" My sisters remembered that, which was amazing.
wow.
So some of the things you have to go through and any traumas in your life, and you go through every little thing. When you had your first ear infection, and that's another thing. Not to get sidetracked, but when you talk about the antibiotics, and trying to figure out what causes disease. With my parents both deceased, we really didn't find any history of rheumatoid arthritis that we know of. But I always had ear infections and strep throat and constantly just antibiotics my whole life. And then when lo and behold, being an athlete that I am, when Advil was introduced, we were popping those after soccer games and flag football games. And just because, oh, this is a pain reliever. Now that I look back on all that, I think that's what really kind of caused some havoc to my gut. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think really there is a potential for anyone just on basically on a Western diet to develop this condition just because it's so high fat, so inflammatory. Just that alone makes it possible to develop this condition. And then when we go and stir the fire by adding antibiotics and painkillers each month and other medications of which, there are endless of all different types, anything from antidepressant drugs to blood pressure drugs. These are all toxic for the body. And then you add the enormous amount of stress and then a lifestyle that doesn't, in most people's cases, not yours, has very little exercise. You've got a perfect storm. And this is why autoimmune disease is just out of control right now, is because
yeah,
all this happening. And yeah, but of all, I think antibiotics is the biggest culprit of the lot.
and I really thought, and a lot of my friends even said this. My family said that when I was diagnosed, but you eat really well, and I thought I ate fairly healthy. I was eating salads all the time, a lot of chicken and lean meats, turkey. But when I look at the chickens and all the antibiotics that had went into it, and you see these, these
Yep.
plump breasts and stuff, that, it changed my thinking. Salad dressings, when you look at really what's in those, you kind of go, wow, I really wasn't eating as well as I thought I was.
Those salad
So,
dressings are just inflammatory omega-6s. That's all they are.
yep.
Even if
Yep.
they're heavily skewered towards olive oil, any other form of oil is going to be very heavily inflammatory. And I know once you've got an autoimmune condition, olive oil will just light you up as well. So like
Yeah.
and all those the chicken and all that, especially in the United States. I mean, it's an antibiotic house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us travel tips. Travel tips. You get around for your work. How do you stay on track? And do you pack food to take with you, or do you research restaurants to go to when you get there? Give us some tips on that.
Well, that was probably one of the most difficult things when I first was diagnosed, and I found myself not eating, which is even worse. I'd go to places, we'd have functions for work where they cater in food, and I would just stay away. But even just in this past year, I cannot believe the changes that I see in restaurants and grocery stores, that people are becoming more aware of gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free. And it's great. It's a great time to be diagnosed with this disease. I guess it's better. I don't know if that sounds right to say that. But what I found is, now I've just learned to adapt to it. So I actually will, when I travel to an area, I'll find a Whole Foods, which is popular here in the States. I don't know if you have them there. Or a grocery store that has organic fruits, vegetables, things like that. I will buy a bunch of those things, make sure that my room that I'm staying, my hotel, has a refrigerator or a freezer. I often carry my blender with me for my smoothies because it's just easy that way. And I bought one of these great Yeti handheld carries that I can take on a plane. I can take in a car that holds ice for a long period of time. So I've got it down to a science. One thing I always keep on hand is fresh fruits, some good protein bars in case I need something to go to. I make a lot of salads ahead of time, pack them up. One thing I found that if I'm forced to go, which I am a lot of time, to a business dinner, you can always find salad or some steamed vegetables that you can get. You just got to learn to carry your own dressing, And I think the most difficult part is we're built in our society to really go out to eat as the social thing. And I kind of felt really left out in that atmosphere because you feel bad because you don't eat. And I think what I found, though, is it's not really me that feels uncomfortable. It's the other people.
That's true. That's so true.
I'd go to dinner and they'd say, no, I'm fine. I'll just have a glass of tea or something. And they're all like, you sure you don't want anything? I'm like, no. And I don't want to be a burden, but I was absolutely fine with, but everybody else feels a little uncomfortable.
That's so insightful. I've noticed that as well. And I had sort of forgotten the degree, though, that people do get uncomfortable when you choose not to eat, or you choose not to eat what they're eating. That's, wow, why not? What's wrong with this?
Exactly. Yeah. Or they feel bad for you, and it's like, no, I'm fine, really,
Yeah.
But I've really learned to make that work. And a lot comes to planning ahead and knowing, I go to a lot of the same areas. So I frequent, know where the restaurants. And I find myself not eating out anymore because it's just easier to do. If I'm going to meet people for a meal, I eat beforehand. And it's just a lot easier, and I'm okay with that.
And they don't mind that explanation as much. If people say, how come you're not eating anything? You just say, I literally just ate before I come here. I couldn't eat another thing. I'm stuffed. They're like, oh, okay. And it really does soften the blow to them a lot more, doesn't it?
And
I've
also taken my own food with me into the restaurant. If I'm with a group of people, I don't feel so bad, and I tip the waiter well, but I say, hey, I'm on a special diet, so I'm taking it with me. So
yeah, and the US restaurants are really good at mixing and matching stuff too. So one thing that Ocean Robin said on a recent podcast, because he's got his recent book that he's just released, he said you can go and you can order, you can look at the menu, and you can go down the menu, you can see all the foods that are on the menu. And you can think, okay, I know that there is, for example, some carrots in there. There are some zucchini in there. There might be some rice in that dish. There's some black beans in this other thing that I otherwise can't eat, but I know there's black beans in there. So you know that back in the kitchen, they have these ingredients, and you can put together
Yeah.
your own little combination.
Yeah, the key with that is I found at a lot of the chain restaurants in the United States that ordering steamed broccoli is not as easy as it would seem to be because they have it pre-seasoned and shipped to them that way. So I actually had a discussion with the manager that I said, can't you just steam some broccoli? And they go, it's already seasoned. It's got the butter. It's got everything. It may have gluten in it. And I was like, wow.
Yeah. Food production. It's scary when you look behind the scenes, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, that gluten wouldn't really affect me that much, but for somebody with celiac disease, that would be devastating. So,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, we've been through all of the bullet points that I've got here on my piece of paper that I wanted to cover with you. Any other messages that you'd like to put out while you got a chance to speak to so many people who are maybe struggling or hitting roadblocks with this condition?
Yeah, I think the one thing, the word hope, this program, finding out that you can actually control your symptoms. I should say I can control my symptoms with the foods that I eat has been life-changing for me. And it has given me hope. When I went through that first year, I really went to some dark places thinking, oh gosh, is this how it's going to be the rest of my life? And it was discouraging, and you get to a point where you're feeling like, what's the point? Because if I can't go hiking, if I can't do this or that, there's hope there, there's hope. And I am actually, my goal is to get off this medication by the summertime, which I do not think is unrealistic for myself. And I hopefully believe that there's people out there that can find the same path. It's just a matter if you choose to do it or not. I've had a lot of people who've come back to me and said, wow, what are you doing? That they've had it for 10, 15 years. And once I tell them, well, I eliminated gluten, I eliminated dairy, I eliminated soy, they go, oh, I can't give up my cheese. And so some people just don't have it in them to do it. And they're just happy with taking the medicine and just thinking that that's going to bridge the effect and make it work for them. That's a personal choice. If you really are discouraged with where you're at right now, my recommendation would say just go all in and try it. You got nothing to lose. Really look for the research. I researched different books and read the Autoimmune Fix, Conquering Arthritis by Barbara Allen, some of the ones you suggested. Research everything you can and find that the common thing that I see is that diet has helped a lot of people on this journey. Dr. Terry Wales, there's something to this. And so if you can kind of look at it, start with an elimination program such as the Paddison Program and go all in, there's hope. And I really think you can find answers and get off the medication because it's not doing your body any good.
Mm-hmm. It's a blessing that you bypassed the prednisone, and that was an insight that you had. We didn't talk about much in your journey, but as far as we can sort of, we can suffice just to say that it was offered and you declined it, right?
Yeah, I saw some ill effects with my father and prednisone, and I didn't like what I've heard about it. So my doctor kept trying to say, hey, it's just going to bridge the gap to make you feel better.
I hate that bridge. I hate that bridge. We shouldn't use that bridge.
What happens when the bridge becomes a highway?
Exactly. That bridge becomes a highway to hell.
Yeah. So I said no. And there's oftentimes I filled the prescription, but I looked at it and I wouldn't do it. And now I look back and I have actually heard stories of people who have said, and I think a couple on your podcast have said, they wish they hadn't stayed on it so long. It damaged them so much. And I understand there's a need for steroids to a certain extent. In fact, when you take the Rituxan, it's administered with the steroid, like 50 milligrams. No, 125 milligrams. 125.
God. My God.
And I was really upset with my doctor because I found out after the fact. She said they do this because there's been some fatalities with the Rituxan. It's highly toxic. They just do it for precaution. So I had asked her on my next infusion if I can cut that in half because I wasn't real happy with it, but she was telling me that she felt better with it because of the safety of it, that you had to administer it with it. But that's the only time I really took any steroids, and I think that I felt like I was forced into that. But knock on wood, hopefully I won't have to have that going forward.
Yeah, that was a long time ago now too, so that stuff's well and truly out of your system. But just as a note for people watching this, that the prednisone administered through an injection is just as bad for leaky gut as what it is when you take it tablet form. There's no way out. There's no way out.
Yeah.
It's going to cause very, very bad long-term negative effects on the digestive wall. Anyway, so well done. Absolutely wonderful. And good luck with your methotrexate goals. You've gotten it to a point now, 5 milligram. I've heard doctors say that it's such an insignificant dose. In fact, I forget the medical term. It's not ineffective dose. They've used it for referring to 5 milligram methotrexate, but almost a non-clinical dose or something. I mean, you're right down there at the moment.
Yeah, I guess when you think about it, they started me on 4 to see if I could handle it. So 2 might seem insignificant. I haven't seen any change in my SCD or my CRP levels.
Yeah.
Everything's been really good.
Yeah.
So I just feel like if I could just do it slowly, 3 or 4 months at a time.
Yeah.
I'm holding myself to stay on this until I keep my exercise regimen
Absolutely.
consistent.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of just a personal goal myself. But so I really feel I'll be medication free in a few months. So
be amazing. Be amazing.
Well, it's a journey that I couldn't have done had I not found you. So thank you, Clint. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for putting all the hard work in. It's the situation where you have the information, but unless you go all in, as you put it, you're not going to get the results. So congratulations. And I really appreciate you sharing your story and your insights. We've learned a lot from you. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Clint.